it's kind of depressing to see that modern culture is becoming exactly like the type of culture that I grew up in, with slight variations. Like when I used to grow up, the conversation was about violence in movies. It was like, well, why do movies have to be violent? Why would anyone enjoy a slasher film unless they're a psychopath? Like what type of pleasure do you get seeing a criminal running after people with a knife? Why would you watch Friday the 13th? Like only disturbed, like only mentally disturbed individuals would watch that. And then the question was about video games. Like, why would you ever play GTA? You get to play as the bad guy and you're shooting at police officer. What message is the game sending to people? Why would anyone enjoy committing crimes? Like, you're actually the character and you're committing crimes. And, you know, the reality is that you had no answer to these people because you would say, well, it's fictional. And they just didn't accept that answer. And they would say that the games have to be banned. Now, given credit where credit is due, they would just say it needs to be banned for people under the age of 18, which is something that I agree with. But the current generation is basically saying that no, art should be banned, period. Like, people should not be allowed to make certain types of films, even if the market wants them. Like, even if the market shows that AAA gaming is in huge decline. Meanwhile, mobile gaming and gacha that barely has any gameplay but just titillates is printing millions of dollars. And people are basically saying, it's like, no, we need to take down the gachas so that the AAA industry, that the Dragon Ages, can flourish again. And this is the argument. And you got a lot of foot soldiers that are pushing for this, whether they're aware of it or not. They're basically trying to say, it's like, look, Disney is suffering because of anime, so we need to crush anime so that Disney can rise again and they can flourish. Now they tried with the argument using violence. But unfortunately, there were studies that showed, no, people who consume violent fictional content aren't necessarily violent in real life. Like, just because someone plays Mass Effect as a renegade and enjoys doing the worst decisions and is hurting NPCs, doesn't mean that that is a bad person. It's not like a Rorschach test. Like, what people do in their fantasy is escapism. It's not necessarily something that they would do in real life. So they tried using that angle and it got debunked. Then they tried using racism and sexism. And it just didn't work. Like, the UN right now is accusing Japan of sexism and misogyny for the way they depict women in manga, and Japan just doesn't care. Like, this is something that's not working. So now they're trying to go after sexuality. They're basically saying that, well, it's pornographic, so it should be treated as such. Visa and MasterCard shouldn't do business with them. It should be treated like... Fiction should be treated exactly 100% like hardcore porn websites. And this is the current argument. This is where we're at. And every now and then you have, like, certain people that are completely ignoring everything that has to do with queer sexuality. Because America is right now filled with queer sexuality. Like, if you look at Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, you get to see a penis, like an actual penis in full display when one of the prince gets out of a bathtub. You get to see his ass, like, he's fully naked. The Boys, you get to see penises in many episodes. Like, this type of queerness or fan service for women, like in The Acolyte, is permissible. But if you were to show a breast, if you were to show a titty, then people would freak out. They would call it pornographic. It's so bad, actually, that when I showed a couple of commercials from 10 years ago that were live air on mainstream television, I had right-wingers say that it's pornographic material, and it was just a girl with cleavage. It was just a girl that was pretending to be a genie. She was an actress, she had big breasts, and it was cleavage. She was trying to sell hair products, if I remember correctly. And people were like, oh my god, that is vile. And then I told them, no, this was a commercial that was aired in America 20 years ago. And they didn't know what to say. Because, again, it's like the Victoria's Secret catalog. But the demoralization is so great that, again, if people see queer stuff, if they see Kratos coming out of the bath and he is naked, no one complains. Like, no one says it's a vile scene or anything. But if you show a female version of Kratos, like you would to show a woman that's very feminine and she's coming out of a bathtub and she's naked, then all of a sudden everyone freaks out. So the demoralization is perfect because we notice that the standard isn't applied equally. I would understand it if the reaction would be the same, and obviously it's not, right? So now we have the question, should movies, right? Like, again, this is not about, I don't like this in film. This is like, should movies be allowed, right? Like, this is the question. Like, should artists have the freedom to create? Should we allow creativity? And should the story require swearing and nudity? Because I would love a good action movie complete with quality CGI, but without the stuff I have to tell my kids to hide their eyes and ears from. So basically, this is a person that is fine with his children seeing violent stuff, right? Because action movies oftentimes have gun battles and violence. Like, he is fine with his kids being exposed to violence. He's just not fine with kids being exposed to swearing, which is very bizarre. Like, no, that's not how it works. Like, we classify movies based on the ESRB, and after your kids become teenagers, if you want to avoid them seeing swear words, then have them see movies for younger kids then. You know, don't allow them to see movies that are... Like, you're the parent. You can basically make it so that your kids don't see any movie. But what I don't understand is, why are you parenting for my kids? Like, I would be perfectly fine if my 16-year-old watches a movie that has swear words in it. Like, I don't think that's a problem, because he probably hears swear words at school. Like, he probably hears worse stuff when he plays with his friends in the playground. I don't understand, like, why should I pearl clutch so hard to the point where I'm parenting other people's kids, right? Like, there is a level of normalcy that I agree, and then there is a level of absurdity which this person seems to delve into. Like, there is no reason to be this absurd, to say that, no, even if, like, I'm watching an action movie, I don't want any curse words in it. Or I don't want any nudity. It's like, fine, you know, no nudity if it's for someone under the age of 14. But if they're old enough to see the scene where a bug splits a human in half and there's guts everywhere and he's puking blood and there's gore, then they're also old enough to see the scene from the same movie where a lady is topless in a shower, in order to symbolize that within the Federation, they don't really care about gender roles. Like, a woman can fulfill the role of a man within the Federation. It is the lore of the universe, even if you find it cringe or whatever. It's what the author intends to show that his society is like. Like, any type of person can join the military. There's no more roadblocks for women, right? Like, this is what the director wanted to show with that scene. And I think that scene belongs in the movie. And again, if your problem isn't with the over-the-top violence and gore, like, you're fine with that, but you're not fine with seeing a topless lady, then I have questions for you. Like, you should not be fine with either, or you should be fine with both. You can't, like, pick and choose in this scenario. Because if your argument is that art influences the real world, which I do think it does when it comes to young people, then why are you fine with showing them over-the-top violence? I mean, the same argument can be made. You know, that scene where a bug splits a human in half. Does it really need to be in the movie? Is it really important? Can't you just have, like, the bug killing the person with one attack and there's no blood and gore? Why do you need the blood and gore? This is the same question that I was asked when I was growing up by the people, the moral busybodies of my generation. It's like, why do you need the blood and gore? Like, why can't they just tell the story while having the soldier killed off screen? And the answer is that it wouldn't be as impactful. That was the answer, right? Like, the blood and gore is like the seasoning. It's not the main dish. Like, sure, you can do it without having it, but it actually makes the movie feel different when it's there. Now, regarding the question, it's like, why would you use nudity in a movie? Well, sometimes, yeah, it can be used without making any sense. And the way they used it back in the day was to promote horror films. Usually slasher films wouldn't cater to the wider audience. Like most people weren't interested in seeing Scream, you know, like a guy with a knife butchering young people. Like that's pretty much what slasher films were in America. They were extremely popular, that they went around the world. But most people weren't into that. So what they did is they would cast very beautiful female actresses. They would take promotional photos with them in swimming pools, with them, in more skimpily clad attire. And they would use that on the poster, and people would come to see the boobies, and they would get the horror. Like, that was the marketing strategy of the time, and it worked. Like, there is a reason why slasher films were insanely popular, not just in America, but as I mentioned, around the world. Like, even in China, people know about Jason Voorhees, they know about Freddy Krueger. It's because it was a very popular genre. So how can you actually use nudity outside of marketing that makes sense? Well, one of them, as I mentioned, is in Starship Troopers, right? Like, they're using nudity in order to highlight the lore of the universe. You can also show that a character doesn't really care about social norms. Like, she just takes her clothing off and doesn't really care. James Bond used to do that. Like, for instance, you would have James Bond meeting a female agent, and they would work together, and they would be very good at stopping the bad guys. And then James Bond goes to the hotel room, and they're talking, they're laying low, and as James is unpacking, you have like the female character come out of the bathroom and she's naked, and James, like, for once actually sees her as a woman rather than another spy, right? So, like, you're creating dynamics, you're creating tension. Anime is really good at doing this. Like, they're using nudity for humor, right? It's humorous purposes, but also they can use it in order to show that the main character is inexperienced. Like the situation, right? For instance, in Uzaki-chan, the guy is using VR and accidentally gropes her breast, right? And she reacts by pulling back. So, like, that's a humorous situation. It shows that the guy is clueless, that he is socially awkward, and you do this in 3 seconds without having to write paragraphs after paragraphs. You can also use nudity in order to make the straight male audience like a character instantly, without, again, having to write pages after pages and hours of expose. You just show a beautiful female character in a swimsuit, and all of a sudden, all the straight men from the theater are going to root for that character. So if it's a slasher film and she looks very gorgeous, then people are going to root for her regardless of her personality. Now, I know that people who aren't straight don't understand this. I know that, women probably don't relate with this as much. But if you're a straight guy with a semi-functioning sex drive, you get it. It's why sex sells. It's why it has been done. Like, it has been done up till now, not because the directors were trying to subvert society. Up till now, it was done because society demanded it. And as I mentioned before, the same can be done with male characters so that women like the male characters. For instance, Thor. Thor is the first comic book movie that actually got women to like it. It didn't get women to like it because of the plot. It didn't get women to like it because of anything else. Women liked it because they saw the poster with the actor, and then when they got to see the movie, they saw the actor shirtless. And they got invested into the story, and then women got invested into comic books as well. And that's how it happened. They used nudity in order to attract more women to watch the show. So it can be used in a bad way, sure. Like, there were a lot of American movies that, for no reason, all of a sudden the main character started fucking, and no one was asking for it. But it can also be used in ways in order to be like seasoning on a steak. Right? Like, you can make a movie without these things, sure. But adding these things in works. And we know it works because it has been tried for decades. Even before cinema, they were doing it in theater. Like, this is human nature. This is normal. Like, again, if you're a person without a sex drive, if you're a person that's not straight, like, I understand if you can't relate with it, but you still have to accept that outside of your feelings, outside of your perceptions, society, like the vast overwhelming majority of adults in society, disagree with you. And if it doesn't bother you as much, like if you can watch a movie while seeing, you're watching Starship Troopers and you're seeing the scene where the lady is topless, or you're watching an action film and someone says fuck, if it doesn't really bother you that much, then let it go. Let it go. Why are you trying to police people over this thing? It's so bizarre. You know, like, what else? Are you going to start policing people over smoking? Are you then going to start policing people over drinking? Are you then going to start policing people over their eating habits? Like, is there a line, or are you just like full on mortal busybody, right? Because if you keep doing this, like, people will resent you. They unironically will, and they are completely right to do so. If you take something away from people that they like, then it's their moral obligation to take something away that you like. It's a requirement. Like, it's how people work. So this thing on Twitter where you're like, oh, why do we allow? Because other people want it. That's why. And yeah, sure, you know, you can say that it's a vice or it's a sin, but you're watching an action movie where people get shot. Shut the fuck up. Let me know what you guys think. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.